right. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to work on a track by an artist named Mikey Palker, and it's called Wayo. And we're going to use it to explore the signal path or different signal path options that we might use on the analog console. And then we're going to discuss the decisions that we're going to make. And then when we're done with that, we're going to do it digitally in Pro Tools. Whenever I begin a project or put up a song for the first time, the first thing I do is just listen to it flat. Listen to the decisions made by everybody involved, if I can. Try to get as much information on the track as I can. Who mixed it? Are they happy with the mix? Is the artist happy with the mix? All of this is really important because you want to be able to have a starting place. You want to be able to put yourself in the shoes of whoever was making these decisions and hear it as they hear it. But then also maintain your objectivity because they might be a little bit off depending on where they mixed it, if they were comfortable in the environment they mixed it. So many of the times we're working with great mixing engineers that have lots of experience, but they're working in unfamiliar environments, and they might tell us that. They might say, hey, it felt really good to me in the room, but I took it out to the car and the bass may have been a little bit too much or too little. So all of these things we take into account, even before we listen to anything. Actually, we're try to get all that info, but sometimes that info is not available, and all you have is the music to listen to, and that's what you have to make your judgments on. So first thing, let's listen to it flat and see how it all feels.
What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand to show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand to show me the other way.
Okay, great. Well, right off the bat, and I just want to discuss what I'm hearing even before we go into the chorus. But one element in the mix where your ear needs to go to as a primarily, and it's pretty much always the vocal. In this case, the vocal, in my opinion, is placed really well. In fact, it might be leaning a little bit loud, which is nice because that'll dictate what I end up doing in the mastering process-wise. But hypothetically, let's say it was a little low. Maybe the vocal was just a little low, and we're going to listen to the chorus in a second too and see where that lands. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem. It doesn't necessarily warrant a mix adjustment if the vocal's a little low. And that's for the mastering engineer to decide. But hypothetically, let's say the mix came in with a little bit of a lower vocal. It just might mean that we might need to emphasize the area around the vocal area. You know, maybe figure out where that vocal speaks and emphasize around that point with EQ. It could be that what's causing the vocal to sound relatively low is that another element in the mix, perhaps the bass or maybe a snare or a kick, all of these things can get in the way of the vocal. So you could end up controlling that bass hypothetically, which will just naturally put more of a focus on the vocal. So all these things can be weighed out, and every mix is different, so you have to figure out the best plan. But in this case, the vocal is in a really good spot. You also might find that you could have a situation where the vocal is a little bit hot, a little loud in the mix, and that might just mean that you might need to emphasize some body in the mix through EQ and mastering to get some support. And then when you're done, you could have a great result. Even if you were presented a mix with a little bit of a loud vocal, you ended up in a place where you got this nice, lush, warm body to support that vocal. And in fact, you might end up in a better place based off that. So, these are things to take into account as you're listening. Let's listen to the verse going into the chorus now.
So take my hand to show me the other way. You were my past love, and love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I?
Okay, that's great. Again, I'm listening to the vocal relationship, the vocal level and EQ and balance relationship to everything else in the mix. And this chorus, it has this kind of a call and response between his vocal and then what he's doing on the acoustic guitar, or the acoustic guitar playing in response to the vocal. They kind of trade back and forth. So that type of relationship where your ear shifts from one focus to another focus, that is something that we'll take into account. Does that acoustic guitar hypothetically overpower the vocal, or is it there to work with the call and response aspect of the vocal? In this case, my ear's going right to that vocal, and then when the acoustic guitar comes in, it's not taking my focus away from the vocal. In fact, it's just there to support it. It's just under where that vocal is. So it keeps everything in perspective for me. This is a very well balanced mix. I'm not hearing any issues. In fact, I'm just hearing things that I want to do. So let's talk about that.
Before we get into the next part of the video, if you're looking to take your music and mixers to the highest professional level, check out the Ultimate Mastering course. Gavin and Ruben cover mastering multiple genres with over 23 hours of in-depth tutorials, lessons, and interviews. They share insights into the art of listening and enable you to understand the techniques and processes you need to achieve the goals of mastering. Check out the description below, and let's carry on.
Before EQing anything, I'm just going to listen through our starting point. And what I mean by starting point is that we have certain go-to predetermined signal paths that does very, very little work. It doesn't really EQ any certain areas in particular. It's a starting place with all of the potential to do work. And what I mean by that is we're actually going through a whole lot. When I just clicked everything in, we're going through all of these processes that work together, but they don't really shift balances very much. It's very, very minimal. In fact, it's more textural than anything. We're just getting the flavor of the analog processing without doing any real shape shifts or control. So what we have right now is we have a tube EQ. And before I even talk about that, actually, I want to talk about the fact that we have to get from digital to analog. So we're working analog right now. So we're playing back in Pro Tools, and we have a 48K file, 48 24-bit file, and we're coming out of an interface digitally, SP to feeding a digital analog converter, and that converter is clocked by an external clock at 48K. Making sure, we can talk about clocking in more in depth later, but that's making sure that it's playing back evenly. All those samples are playing back in a very even way, which, you know, if you don't have good clocking, it can fluctuate a little bit, which doesn't sound as good. So if you have your digital clocked really, really well, it's going to be of benefit. So this converter, this DAC1, this benchmark converter, is now converting that digital signal to an analog signal. And now I'm working on the analog console. The first thing that it's hitting is this tube EQ. And right after the tube EQ, it's going to these resistor pots, which work in dB steps. And I'm able to resist left and right, in left channel independent of the right channel, add resistance, essentially turning down the signal. But I don't like to think of it that way. I like to think of it as just part of the natural gain structure, the feel of this console, how we like to work it. The benefit to having some resistance post this EQ is I can decide to, well, there's many benefits, but one of the main benefits is I can decide to push more level into this tube EQ and in dB steps resist post this EQ, which will allow me to saturate tubes a little more and allow me to create some tube saturation. This is all for textural purposes, to color the sound in a way that texturally feels pleasing. This is all subjective stuff. Now, you can decide to do it in varying degrees. Generally, I like to do it maybe just in a dB's worth of resistance. So instead of, let's say I end up deciding that 4 dB, depending on how the mix is sent to us, maybe 4 dB hypothetically is a really great place to hit this 2BQ in terms of level. I could decide that after listening to that, I want to saturate the tubes a little more. So I'm going to add 1 dB of resistance post this EQ, which means now I got to feed it with 5 dB to match that gain. So we have a scenario where I'm first off hitting this with 4 dB, and it's feeling nice, but when I hit it with 5 dB and add a dB of resistance post that EQ, now the tubes are saturating more and I'm getting more of that tube textural feel. So that's where I'm actually going to start out, is I'm going to have a flat setting on this tube EQ, which I'll explain more in a second, and then a dB of resistance post. I know that works on a lot of, that's part of the sound that we create here at our facility. It's part of the way we work on music. Not on everything, but on a lot of things we'll do that too. Then we have a GML solid state EQ. And oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, we will shape the bottom. We'll use this EQ just to do some bottom shaping. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll cut a half dB at 31 hertz and we'll boost a half dB at 45 hertz. A little bit of a split there. What that does is that creates some nice foundation. It's not like we're trying to do that to everything because we think that every mix needs a half dB at 45 hertz and a half dB cut at 31 hertz. It's to set up the foundation of the frequency spectrum. It's like when you're building a house, you want to make sure that you have this nice solid foundation to build your house on. You could be building all different types of houses, but you just know that every house needs a good foundation. So you could have, hypothetically, a mix that has too much bass, and you might be cutting a whole bunch of bottom, either pre-console or on the tube EQ, but you're still doing this bottom shaping, because that's just part of the sound. So we can pop that in and out to show you the difference of what that's doing, but that's often where we start with anything we work on as part of setting up that foundation. And what I have in the chain right now, I actually don't have any tube compression in the chain yet. But right after this solid state EQ, we have a high frequency limiter. It's a Maselec high frequency limiter, also a de-esser. We don't think of it as a de-esser because we don't use it for taking out S's, although sometimes we will. If we have a mix with a vocal that has a lot of S's on it or something that needs some de-essing. But we think of it as a high frequency limiter, a way to control the high frequency information. In fact, it's not just high frequency, it's actually mids and upper mids. It actually starts working at around 2.5K. And some people are surprised to know that it actually works that low. But it's a great tool to have always in the chain. It's part of the sound, not to darken things, but to allow for us to control high-end frequency information in a mix, and then perhaps even brighten something into it. And often we do that type of thing, where let's say we have a dark mix, and we know we need to brighten it a whole bunch. Maybe the mixing engineer was working in an environment where the speakers were telling him that he had more information, or he or she had more high-end information that was actually needed. So what we end up getting in mastering is something that's darker than will translate. That it's too dark to translate nicely across all environments, all earbuds, car stereos, home stereos, TV systems, everything that somebody would listen on or a consumer would listen to something on. It's going to translate way too dark. So we have to do a whole lot of brightening. The problem with doing that is if you brighten something too much, you could get all of these negative characteristics of trying to brighten a dark mix, something sounding edgy, brittle, harsh. So introducing a high frequency limiter post EQ will allow you to brighten something into some high frequency limiting, and for it to feel open but smooth. So it's nice because you have the ability to then brighten as much as you want without something feeling digital or edgy. And you can, of course, really decide to work that high frequency limiter harder and then EQ into it harder, doing two processes that work against each other to create a balance that feels actually natural. Sometimes you have to do a whole lot of work to end up in a place where it feels like you didn't do much processing at all. Or you can use it in very minimal amounts. Just a little tickle of high frequency limiting and a little tickle of EQ will end up in this finished place, which feels really natural and nice. So that's the benefit of using some high frequency limiting. Post that high frequency limiter, we have a solid state compressor, this Allen Smart C1. It's kind of like an SSL type of compressor, and that is there to glue everything together. And you can decide how much or how little to glue everything. And the way I like to think about this process is working it with your ear, while your ear is on a mix, understanding and being able to come up with an opinion on where those elements in the mix are, how they're moving around each other. In other words, how dense is your mix? How much space is there? Or how dense is it, right? Are the elements really close together and really tight sounding? Or is there a whole lot of space? So introducing this type of compressor that is there to glue things and tighten things, you have to know how far to go based off how the elements are moving around each other in a mix. So having your ear on that while using this tool is very important. Also, the makeup gain post the compression, well, it's the makeup gain after the compression. Understanding how much or how little to adjust that makeup gain will influence what's happening after it, which is some limiting. So right after this makeup gain, which is, I think of it as the last gain stage in the analog process before we can then convert back from analog to digital with this benchmark converter. And then post that converter, we often get a little bit of level digitally because we're understanding how much level we're hitting going from analog to digital. So hypothetically, this is all gain structure, which is hugely important in mastering. If I didn't get any level post that conversion, right now I'm getting 2 dB of digital level post the conversion. Let's say I drop that to 0. I would want to hypothetically hit that converter with 2 dB more to make up for that gain difference. That's going to completely sound different. I'm relying on the level to be achieved on the converter or everywhere else in the chain pre-conversion, which is making everything work harder. I find that I like to get a little bit of level post-conversion, which will allow everything in the chain to relax, work less hard, and put a little bit of the lifting on that limiter post. So what I'm doing is I'm spreading out all of the gain along the chain in varying degrees, which is important because you don't really ever want, unless you're deliberately doing something like this, you don't ever want to have one piece of processing doing too much. And the reason behind that is if you have that type of situation, if you have one piece of processing doing too much work, you might hear it. You might hear the negative aspects of that process. But if you have every little piece of processing doing just a little bit, it feels more natural. And you're also getting the best out of each process. So, of course, we'll explain all of that further as we get into more situations. But that's a quick overview of all the processes in the chain that we have right now. And of course, we are also clocking this analog to digital converter with a separate clock, because what we're going to do is we're going to record in at 44. Even though we're starting at 48, we have this analog stage in between. So we're starting at 48, converting from from digital to analog, doing all the processing analog, converting back to digital and clocking and capturing at a different sample rate at 44. So that's also important to know. All right, cool. So let's try EQing this. I'm gonna turn the gain down pretty far, the gain of the digital analog converter feeding into the chain, and I'm just going to gain up until I find a good place as a starting point where I want to work around, like a good starting area.
So take my hand and show me the other way. You were my past love, and love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading.
Cool. So I found a good starting point. I like to do that very quickly. I want to be able to do that probably within 10 to 15 seconds. If it takes longer than that, I'd rather start all over. I want to make sure that I want to gain into all of these processes that are doing very, very minimal work, and again, not really shifting the EQ or much in the mix, just doing very, very light amounts of work, just to tell me what the potential of what I can do on this console will be. So you might have noticed that I gained it up a little far and saw that things might start feeling a little bit processed and congested, and then I kind of back it off a little bit and see how things maybe get a little too loose, so I get the feeling like I want to push it more, and then I do push it more and find that zone where everything just starts feeling like it's working. I haven't touched the EQ, I haven't touched any type of compression settings other than what's already there as our starting point. I'm just getting a feel of where everything is positioned, and it's now telling me where I want to go in terms of changing EQ settings, and perhaps even introducing different ideas when it comes to compression. So now we're in this place. First thing I'm going to do, or the next thing I'm going to do, is see what I want to do EQ wise.
So take my hand and show me the other way. You were my past love, and love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day.
Everything that I'm doing right now is all to get that bass kind of moving around the vocal in a way that feels like I'm getting some movement. So I'm using compression musically. I'm not using it to achieve anything specifically in terms of level, or to try to emphasize any certain part of the mix. I'm just trying to get some musical relationships in terms of movement with the elements kind of dancing around each other. So and the way I'm doing that is I'm listening to how they're all interrelated, similar to how a mixer would mix, but now I'm just using tools. I'm using this in mastering, just by working on the 2-track to see how that bass, how he's playing it is supporting the vocal. And what I'm finding is if I just give it a little bit of tension in the lower mids around 120 with really wide band EQs, if I'm able to create a little bit of ledge there underneath the vocal, for the vocal to sit on, it really favors the track. So I'm actually, and I often do this, I'm shifting the bottom a little bit upwards to create that nice support in the vocal. So what I'm doing is I'm not really changing too much around 60 from where I was before, but I'm emphasizing around 120. I'm emphasizing just a hair around 3K, and I'm emphasizing a lot more around 6K. So as I'm creating that support underneath the vocal, I'm also emphasizing right around the vocal or above the vocal too, so it kind of blooms open in the low mids and also in the upper mids. It's something that I often do. And then I'm not changing too much around 10K, just giving it a little bit of air up top. Of course, we have the GML I'm monitoring through what's going on in the GML in terms of that bottom shaping. So it's influenced, what I'm changing on the 2BQ is influenced based off what I'm hearing already on the GML. That's something to talk about. Now, if I had this at 0 on the bands and just passing through the piece and not actually having it do anything to the bottom, I might end up with a slightly different EQ with the 2BQ. But because I'm monitoring through this bottom shaping as a starting point, it's influencing my decisions on the 2BQ. Let's listen to what this solid state EQ is actually doing now that we have this 2BQ in a good place. I'm just going to click it in and click it out so we can check that out. So we're going to start with it in.
Past love, in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. What you wanna do, where you wanna go?
It's just there to just control the bottom a little bit. And actually it's telling me some things too. It's also telling me that I might want to, in that chorus, just maybe not get as much support, you know? And also, the thing about mastering is a lot of times you'll come up with a setting, but you might you might change that setting as the song goes down. It won't be just one setting and you kind of set and forget. It's music. It's always moving from different sections to different sections. So we might do rides on the EQ. In fact, we might do rides with these attenuators, adding more resistance from verse to chorus. I don't know that we'll do that on this song, but we often do those types of things. So, you know, listening from the song to beginning to end, you might find that teaches you a whole lot about what your approach is, and you might want to configure that a little bit differently as everything reveals itself. In fact, let's listen to the verse into the chorus and see how it all is feeling right now.
The other way, it's too late to fold your fire, red bombs all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. You were my past love, in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were.
Yeah, we're getting closer to being in a really good finished place, and just by popping in that EQ, that solid state EQ in and out, it kind of told me a little bit more about where I want to place everything in terms of EQ. So I like to encourage that, to just make sure that you know what every piece of processing you're introducing is actually doing. And is it necessary or not to have? Is it adding? Is it giving you something that's beneficial, or is it actually creating a little bit of a disconnect? So just being aware of everything is very important. So what I'm going to do now is piece by piece, I'm going to soft bypass. I'm going to take, without actually unpatching it in the signal path, I'm just going to put everything in bypass and then flip it out and flip it in so we have an idea of what everything's doing. So I'm going to put all these pieces in soft bypass, and now we can hear as I put them in one by one, we can hear how everything is complementing everything else. Everything is out right now.
The other way, it's too late to fold your fire, red bombs all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. You were my past love, in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy.
Great. And you'll also notice how much that high frequency limiter is really not only controlling what's going on up top, but really creating some actual warmth down below because of the way it's shifting and controlling that top end. So I'm just gonna leave everything in and just bypass and unbypass that high frequency limiter.
The other way, oh. It's too late to fold your fire, red bones all day, oh. So take my hand and show me the other way, oh. You were my past love, in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. What you wanna do, where you wanna go?
You might notice that as I take it out, that vocal becomes a little bit, it feels unsupported and it becomes a little bit pointed and a little bit essy. That's probably because I'm EQing around that area. But I'm EQing it around that area knowing that I have that in place. So those two processes are working against each other. In fact, if I didn't have that in there, I might not EQ as much. So it's a great example of showing how all of these processes are working together. It's not that, if I didn't have that in place, I might not EQ as open. And let's say I didn't EQ as open, and then I might decide not to put something like this in the chain because at that point in the process, I might not feel like I even need it. But having it in the chain as a starting point and then hearing into pushing level and gain into all these processes, it gives me the idea of the potential where I can EQ some top, upper mid information around the vocal area, and this is there to kind of control everything and allows for some cushion, if you will. Imagine, I like to think of the digital ceiling. It's like this, it's a brick wall, and if you have transients hitting a brick wall, it sounds processed, but if you put certain things before that brick wall, like a limiter, for instance, or compression, or high frequency limiting, it's almost like you have this brick wall and then you put like a big pillow or a blanket right up against it. So as transients and things are hitting, there's a little bit of absorption, a little bit of give, a little bit of cushion to kind of, that you can work up against to soften things so it doesn't feel hard and pointed, but rather it has some give and it has a little bit of, it kind of forgives the edge and hardness of things. These are sound characteristics that if we understand them, we can use as tools. So you might find that, there's certain limiters out there that are advertised as being extremely transparent. Like, this is the most transparent limiter out there, and they'll market it that way. And that's a great tool for that particular situation where you want to have your transients very much maintained. You don't want to get in the way. You don't want to cushion them at all. You want things to hit hard. If I'm working on some EDM or some hip hop or, certain genres that I just want to get a whole lot of intensity and impact, I might want to change how I've set my limiters and my high frequency limiters and my compressors because I really want things to hit without any type of absorption. But if I'm working on a track like this, I want to have that nice soft characteristic as I'm hitting close to the ceiling to absorb those transients in a musical way. I'm using all these processes and understanding them all for musical purposes, because it's adding a characteristic. It's allowing for the characteristic of the song to feel warm and inviting and smooth, rather than trying to get a whole lot of aggression on drums, because musically, this track doesn't really feel like it wants that. This is completely subjective, but just kind of explaining, the benefits to having a limiter, like an L2, for instance, which often gets a lot of criticism for absorbing too much on transients. But I love using it for that very reason. We can switch it out with other limiters post-conversion to digital. that maintain a little bit more of the attack and transience, a little bit more transparently. But if you use the L2 for what it's known for it actually kind of adds a little bit of a warmth and a cushion. It's a musical choice, So I love using the L2 still for that reason. Now, although I'm starting to get in a good place here, I'm using the EQ, in my opinion, to warm up a little bit too much, and I'd rather get that with some tube compression. So I want to introduce this Manly Variable MU as a way to hug some bottom. So I want to, and I've got it set in a way right off the bat where it's just I haven't plugged it in yet, I haven't patched it in yet, but the threshold's just 1.5 dB. It's just there just to tickle a little bit and just to absorb a little bit of just the body. I want to use it to hold some bottom, and it'll do that naturally. In fact, I love this compressor for that reason. It allows me to EQ and gain into it and create some nice bottom support. I won't even have to necessarily EQ that warmth, that bottom support around 120 as much, because I'm going to let that compressor do that work for me. And if we do it right, it'll just feel like it's doing it naturally. So now I have this previous EQ on the board. I'm going to reset. I'm going to start over. I don't want to simply introduce the compression without starting over, because all of these parameters, all of these decisions that I've made are based off not having this compressor in the chain. If I introduce it right now, these parameters that are set aren't necessarily going to work with just putting it in. In fact, let's do that just to show you why. All I'm going to do without it changing anything is put this tube compressor in the chain. Let's hear how this sounds.
Love my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading.
So it doesn't sound balanced right now. My ear's going to the bass and the vocal feels a little tucked, but that's because I got all this EQ moving into it. So I like to start from scratch. I could EQ and get happy and using my previous EQ as a starting point, but I often like just to start over. And you can do this very quickly if you have all your processes in order. So I'm going to go back to our flat setting. And the flat setting is not flat. It's flat in relation to all the processes post. So what we actually have is we have all frequencies, all bands boosted, and to create this arc shape, this kind of like this reverse smile face shape. So we have these cues boosted in these varying degrees. We have 8, 10, 10, 10, 8. So it creates this arc shaped curve. Now it doesn't mean that I'm getting 8 dB at 60 and 10 dB at 120 and 10 dB at 3 and 10 dB at 6 and 8 dB at 10. I think, in mastering, it's very important to understand that everything is relative to everything else. So if you boost all the frequencies, you are creating an EQ shape, a global EQ shape that's affecting the entire frequency spectrum. So in fact, it might look like you're doing a lot, but you're also doing very little, because all of these bands are relating to each other relative to one another. So if you start this as a flat setting, it's creating this arc-shaped curve, but the compression is creating a smile face curve. So the EQ and the compression are working off each other to create this this relationship, which actually ends up very, very close to flat. But what you're getting by doing all of this is this nice textural feel that sounds pleasing to me and hopefully the client, which it's proven to. Everybody tends to just love the way music travels through this console, using this as a starting point. So we got back to our starting point, but now we have the tube compressor in the chain. So I'm going to do what I did before, is I'm just going to lower the gain significantly and then I'm going to gain into these processes again. This is a technique that I use all the time, every day. And I'm going to, again, see where it goes first as I do that.
Loving, love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy.
Now, right off the bat, I'm noticing that having that tube compressor in there is kind of muddying the sound a little bit. So I'm going to have to EQ to really utilize the potential of introducing this process in there.
Loving, love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. You are my queen beehive, our friendship is on the brink. Why would I sink the ship, evacuate and throw away the key? And when I hold you deep in my arms, it's like holding ya. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy.
All right. I always like to make decisions very, very quickly. And what I found myself doing is I found that the compressor, the tube compressor, was holding that bottom like I anticipated it doing. So I didn't have to emphasize some low mid support around 120 anywhere as much because the compressor was doing that for me. In fact, really all I wanted to do was use this tube compressor to hold the body of the mix and then just EQ it open a little bit around 6K and maybe even around 3K a pinch. And then also what I was doing is I was releasing just a hair. I was backing off the amount of work that the high frequency limiter was doing. So I was just using that to open up everywhere from the mid to the highs up a little bit, and then kind of EQing to compensate for that change a little bit. And this is very, very fine-tuned stuff. So my ear is on how that bass is moving in relationship to the vocal, making sure that vocal is right on top of everything in the mix. Now that we've got this nice warm glue happening to support it all, because it's very easy if you don't EQ it, that bass could potentially overtake the vocal in a way that feels like you might be just trying to hear the vocal too much, and to an ear that doesn't really understand audio, like, you know, just a average music fan that's buying music, I could release it hypothetically, not that I would, but somebody might release some music where the vocal's a little bit under the bass, and they might not be able to articulate why they're not connecting to the song, but they might find that, yeah, for whatever reason, it just feels like it's too distant, that they're not able to fully connect to the artist. So it's our job as engineers, all engineers, but mastering engineers too, to make sure that the song connects with the listener, the artist connects with the listener. And if we can do things to just enhance that connection, we've done the best job. So the goal always is to create a musical connection, to create that connection. If we can make that connection better or greater in any way, to introduce that, but to not add any disconnect along the way. So what does that mean? If you end up in a place where it just creates a little bit of a veil, or you're hearing the processes too much, or maybe you've gone and tried to force too much level onto a mix that wasn't mixed to fully, it wasn't intended to achieve that much level. And we can talk a whole lot about that in further episodes. But all of these things can create a disconnect. So the untrained ear, the untrained listener, the unsophisticated in terms of understanding these processes, you know, my mom, for instance, puts on the song she might not know how to articulate it, but she might not feel as connected to the music. But if we do our job right, she might put it on and say, wow, I don't know, I just feel connected to this. I can't even explain it. I just somehow resonate with this sonically. And then we've done our best job. So going back to the song, let's listen from the verse into the chorus and see how everything's feeling.
Game. So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand and show me the other way.
I'm feeling really good about where we are, so I'm going to do a print from the beginning to end, and I'm going to have my hands on the board, on the EQ, in case I want to make a ride. It doesn't mean I'm even actually going to make a ride. I might just breathe on the knobs a little bit, but my hands are going to be ready, anticipating anything that I might feel like I might need to do in terms of an adjustment as the song goes down, because it's very rarely one setting for us as from beginning to end. Oftentimes we're making tiny little adjustments to make sure that everything feels and maintains its focus and everything stays in context.
What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. You were my past love, in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. You are my queen beehive, our friendship is on the brink. Why would I sink the ship, evacuate and throw away the key? And when I hold you deep in my arms, it's like holding ya. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. And I love the sound when our beastly howls unite. You are my prime, my lover, my Shakti archetype. Take me down to the valley below. Let's shake the dust from the seeds we sow. I'm floating in your ocean, can I make a motion? What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. So take my hand and show me the other way. So take my hand and show me the other way.
Great. That all felt really good, and as it was going down, I was just breathing on the EQ a little bit, just to make sure that the bass and vocal relationship, everything just felt nice. You know, sometimes, you know, the vocal would change. I mean, the vocal changes a little bit from verse to chorus, so I'm just breathing on things to make sure it all feels in context. Not necessarily deliberately trying to adjust 6K at any particular time. Just always keeping my ear global, making sure it all feels good. And if I hear that the vocal's getting tucked a little bit, or perhaps a little bit not supported enough, just making little tiny adjustments to adjust for as those things change, as the song goes down, just making sure it all feels balanced and in context. So I'm going to document the settings, and now we're going to recreate this digitally in Pro Tools. All right, now we're set up to work on the same track, but now digitally, entirely digitally, inside the box in Pro Tools. And you can see here that I already have some parameters set on the LMC plugin, the Lurssen mastering console, and then also a little bit of EQing with the Pro Q by FabFilter. And it's really great. I really like using these two tools in conjunction. But let's, for the moment, just focus on what's going on with the LMC. So you'll notice here, if I click right here, you'll see all of the different processes in the chain. And you'll notice at the bottom here, there's a 5-band EQ. I've already done some work, but you know what? Let me just open up a fresh one so you guys can see how this all works. All right, here's I'm going to just zero all these. And actually, by zeroing all these, you'll see that they don't quite go to zero. All right, so let's just work with this one for the moment. And I'm going to put this one that we already have the preset dialed in. I'm going to just bypass that. Okay, so let's explain this. There's a value of 8, 10, 10, 10, and 8 here. The cues are preset. You can see 60 hertz, 120 hertz, 3K, 6K, and 10K. These ones on the end is a low shelf and a high shelf, and these are bells in the middle. Now, I wouldn't think of this as boosting this 8 and this boosting this 10. This all together, all of the bands together, are creating that arc-shaped curve that I was explaining earlier on the analog console. And if you look here, this 2BQ is this 2BQ right here. And this solid state EQ post this 2BQ is doing that bottom shaping that we were talking about earlier. Then there's this tube compressor that is going to be used to create that low mid support and that hugging of bottom. So then we can then crack it open on top. High frequency limiter, like we were explaining earlier. And then we have this solid state compressor at the very end with the makeup gain and to tighten more or less. So if you really think about these tools all working together and influencing each other, you can think about how you want to shape the EQ into these different compression flavors. And then if you want to adjust the parameters of how this high frequency limiter is working and how this compressor is tightening or loosening, and then the makeup gain post that, those are the parameters that we can adjust. And then after this, there's a brick wall limiter that is getting a little bit of level just to allow for some additional level, and also to not have to work these processes post that level and that limiting as hard. So everything's working together. Now, I'm using the pop rock preset, which utilizes this type of tube compression. For instance, I could switch over to Americana Loose, and now we've got this type of tube compression, which is more of a vintage type of tube compression. It's going to have different characteristics. It's going to hold the bottom a little differently, and also texturally it's going to feel a little bit different. But you know, I could also go over to EDM, for instance, and that doesn't have any tube compression at all. And there's going to be plenty of material that will explore EQing and mastering without utilizing that type of compression. All right, let's get rid of this guy and go back to the one that has our flavor on it. Now you'll notice that I'm gaining up 1.5 dB, just level feeding into all of this processing. The push knob is going to be set to 0. We're not going to touch that for this song. We'll use this in other examples, but we're not going to need to utilize this push knob at all. I'm going to flip this in just to show you guys what this is doing I've got a little bit of emphasis around 120 to create that support. I've got a half click. You'll see if I put that at 10, that's just how it presets to without any adjustments. But I've just got a half click there at 10. You know, you could think of that just a hair over 10 at 3K, and then I've got a click and a half at 11. So it's going to 11 plus one more further. And you see this EQ works in between the numbers too. You can see it visually. So I've got a little bit of lift around 6K, a little tiny, even smaller lift around 3K, and a little lift around 120. And I haven't even adjusted these parameters these much right here. Right now we've got 20.6 on the threshold of the solid state de-esser. It's usually, if I were to zero, it's usually at 21.0, but 20.6 was where I ended up. I just backed that off a hair, and when we click this in and out, you'll see why. But based off the hold that I was getting from this natural warmth that I was getting, that natural low mid hold I was getting from the tube limiter, I felt that just opening up the de-esser, the high frequency limiter, just a hair allowed for a nice expansion up top, similar to what I did earlier on the analog console when implementing the tube compression. And then in terms of changing the parameters here on the solid state compressor, I didn't have to do that, much like I didn't have to do it on the analog console. I did, however, introduce some EQ with the fab filter, the Pro Q2, pre the LMC, and we'll talk about that in a second. And like I said, I often like to work these two EQs or these two plugins off each other. All right, so let's just hear what the LMC is doing without that Pro Q. Obviously, we have to understand that my decisions by setting the LMC was based off monitoring and finding a happy relationship between the Pro Q and the LMC. But without the Pro Q in, let's just hear what the LMC is doing.
What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to forge your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. You are my queen beehive, our friendship is on the brink.
So this is nice. We're getting all of the hype, all of the power in the bass, and the bass is filling up the room nicely. But it's without the Pro Q in, it's feeling a little bit like my ears going to the bass, and it's feeling a little congested. So let's open up what I've got with this Pro Q and put this in and listen to this.
What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to forge your fire, it burns all day. So take my hand and show me the other way. You are my queen beehive, our friendship is on the brink.
I'm just gonna click this in and click this out.
What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to forge your fire, it burns all day.
All right, so let's see what I'm doing here with the Pro Q. Let's start from the lowest band all the way up to the highest band. At 60, I'm just taking away just 1/10 of a dB with a Q of 1.0. I find that 1.0 is a good starting place. You can always adjust from there, but I'm just doing smallest amount of work. Just taking away 1/10 at 60, and I'm adding 0.16 dB, just a hair over 1/10 at 80, which is it's just tightening the bottom at 60 and then lifting it at 80, which creates this tilt upwards. It's great for just controlling your bottom. Of course, this is all with your ear on what's happening with the vocal. And that brings me to what's going on at just above 1K. So I have my, at 1250.5 hertz, just over 1K, or 1.2K. I've got a boost of 0.36 dB. And I've just lowered my Q a hair, just below 1.0, so it's at 0.982. That's very, very small adjustment, just to tighten it a little bit more. I didn't want it too wide. And then I have just a tenth of a dB boosted, just below 6K. I've got 5947.8, just a tenth there. I decided that was where I wanted it to lift. You can slide it around. This is all completely subjective, but it just gives you a little bit of control about how your EQ is feeding into what's going on with the LMC, and of course those two processes relating off each other. So let's just A/B this and see. Now that we understand what we're doing, let's A/B and see what that's doing in relationship to what's happening with the LMC.
You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy.
Cool, so that's giving us that lift, and that's certainly putting the vocal back into perspective. My ear's going to the vocal, whereas before I did this tiny bit of light EQing with the Pro Q, it wasn't as much. But for me, it's just still a little bit too much around the vocal, so I'm just gonna lower this. I'm gonna try lowering it to just a quarter of a dB, 0.25. Let's try that. See what this does.
You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy.
I'm actually preferring that, and I'm also just gonna maybe just lower this. Instead of a full tenth, I'm just gonna go to 0.07. I mean, this is so small, but all of this creates the end result that is favorable. Because if you click them all, if you just bypass this whole process and unbypass, you'll see that it actually is doing quite a lot, even these little amounts. So let's go to bypass now.
You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading.
Let's hear it now in.
You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading.
I'm gonna flip back and forth on the fly for you guys.
You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. You were my past love, I'm in love, my timeline is fading. You were my past love, should I go? Babe, I'm going crazy. What you wanna do, where you wanna go, what's your game? So take my hand and show me the other way. It's too late to fold your fire, it burns all day.
Great, and you'll notice that when it's out, when that Pro Q is out, the bass is kind of muddying up the vocal a little bit. It feels a little congested. As soon as I click it in, all of those little tiny processes all together is putting everything into perspective for me. It's putting my ears going to that vocal, but I'm still getting that nice warmth bottom. So I'm working these two processes off each other to create that, making sure that I have all of that nice warm support down below in the low mids, and that bass is moving. But at the same time, always making sure my ears go into the vocal. And of course, we can this level, dialing it back a little bit, pushing a little more is all subjective. But the idea is to get the most out of everything. We're getting what we set out to do. Everything that we hope to achieve, we're achieving, and we can do that in varying degrees. So let that be everybody's starting point. Please have fun with it. Try experimenting, moving parameters in terms of where you want your boosts or cuts. And see and explore and experiment and see how that favors the track or maybe creates a little bit of a disconnect, and form opinions based off all of that. This is what mastering is. So I hope you guys have fun with it, and I'll see you in the next episode.